Channel's Week in Review. Import restrictions are eased on Gaza, Avigdor Lieberman is formally charged, a new documentary explores the Jewish legacy on Broadway, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now on this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, happy Civic New Year, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Rebecca Honig Friedman, filling in for Stephen I. Weiss. In a sign of the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas after the fighting in Gaza in November, on Sunday, Israel allowed truckloads of construction materials into Gaza for the first time in 5 years. Israeli officials said such materials will now be transported daily via the Keren Shalom crossing for use in housing and other construction projects in Gaza. Previously, Israel had barred the import of construction materials into Gaza because officials said they could be used to make weapons or to build tunnels and bunkers. The change in policy comes amid continuing talks with Egypt, which brokered the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas after 8 days of fighting in November. In exchange for Israel's easing of import restrictions, Israeli officials said, Egypt is supposed to help curb the smuggling of weapons into Gaza. In other Israeli news, recently resigned Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman was formally charged this week with fraud and breach of trust for allegedly promoting Israel's former ambassador to Belarus in exchange for his providing information about an investigation into Lieberman. The indictment contains new evidence, including a conversation between Lieberman and Deputy Foreign Minister Danny Ayalon, who, according to JTA, will testify at the trial. Lieberman resigned his post as foreign minister after it was announced he would be charged, but has retained his seat in the Knesset and as head of the right-wing Yisrael Beitenu party, which merged with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party in October of 2012 to form a unity government. How the charges against Lieberman will affect the upcoming Israeli elections on January 22nd remains to be seen. Meanwhile, Netanyahu pleased liberal Jewish groups last week when he asked the head of the Jewish agency, Natan Sharansky, to review policies about women's prayer at the Western Wall and to come up with a solution for non-Orthodox women's groups who want to pray at the wall. Currently, Orthodox religious practice dictates prayer at the main plaza at the wall, and women challenging these rules have been detained by police and in some instances arrested. In his directive to Sharansky, Netanyahu reportedly said that the wall, quote, must remain a source of Jewish unity rather than division. Here in America, a woman was charged with fraud for allegedly trying to turn a nation's tragedy to her own financial gain. The woman, Bronx native Noelle Alba, is accused of falsely claiming to be an aunt of Noah Posner, the 6-year-old Jewish boy who was killed in the shootings at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, and soliciting funds she said would be used for the boy's funeral. She allegedly made the same false claim to FBI agents, according to the federal complaint filed in Connecticut, and if found guilty, could be charged with up to 5 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000. In other prison-related news, maintaining Jewish observance just got easier for a prison inmate in Texas. A federal appeals court in New Orleans ruled this week that Max Musazada, an inmate serving a 75-year sentence for a murder charge, should be served kosher meals, overturning a lower court ruling. At question was not whether kosher-keeping Jews should be allowed access to kosher meals, but whether Musazada is sincere in his claims to be a kosher observer, since, the prison system argued, he had sometimes eaten food that was not kosher certified. However, in the majority opinion, Judge Jerry Smith wrote that, quote, a finding of sincerity does not require perfect adherence to beliefs expressed by the inmate, and even the most sincere practitioner may stray from time to time. Over in Maryland, observant Jews may soon have an easier time getting access to kosher wine. State Delegate Sam Aurora drafted a bill that would allow Maryland residents to buy kosher wine online from sellers outside the state. Currently, Maryland law allows only in-state wine sales online. There are no kosher wineries in the state of Maryland, according to the Washington Examiner. But in the state of Hawaii, there is a new Jewish senator. Democrat Brian Schatz, until now Hawaii's lieutenant governor, will replace the state's longtime Senator Daniel Inouye, who passed away on December 17th. Schatz's appointment brings the number of Jewish senators up to 12. If the Jewish imprint on the Senate is still relatively light, the Jewish legacy on Broadway musical theater is immense, And it's the subject of a new documentary, as Meredith Ganzman reports.
In the 2005 Tony Award-winning musical Spamalot, an entire number is devoted to proclaiming you won't succeed on Broadway if you don't have any Jews. Call it a comical or an industry stereotype or a historical phenomenon, but so many of Broadway's most famous composers were indeed Jewish. From George and Ira Gershwin to Sheldon Harnick and Charles Strauss, and more contemporary players like Sondheim, Schwartz, and Shaman, the list doesn't lie. And a new documentary that premiered on New Year's Day on PBS, Broadway Musicals: A Jewish Legacy, directed by Michael Cantor, explores how Jewish American songwriters shaped American musical theater.
Jewish liturgical music plays a big part in this story. You hear how the Gershwins love to play with Jewish liturgical music and poke fun at it and twist it around in a show like Porgy and Bess.
David Lehman explains in the film,
It ain't necessarily so. The things you're liable to read in the Bible, it ain't necessarily so.
The things that you're liable to read in the Bible, it ain't necessarily so.
That line is actually lifted from the liturgy, because when you're called up to the Torah in the temple on Saturday, you have to make a blessing, and you say, Baruch Hu Esad Hashem Hamvarach, which is the same thing as, it ain't necessarily so. So to borrow a prayer over the Bible for a song that debunks the Bible seems to me to be the very definition of chutzpah, cheekiness.
The film features many of the great Jewish Broadway composers, including Tony Award-winning Mark Shaman.
Jewish songwriters, just through the culture, especially the time that they were writing, the Jewish kind of phrases, those tonalities were part of their life. So you and the night and the music just naturally came up. You couldn't help it. I believe even, I think Cole Porter, Gentile, said, I know how to write a hit show is to write with Jewish tonalities. I mean, he wrote, he knew what he was doing. I mean, that's just made for a cantor. Mm-hmm. But then he lets his non-Jewish side come out.
According to Cantor, Jewish songwriters brought more than Jewish melodies and comic sensibility. Above all, the music and the story reflected the idea of tikkun olam.
Let's heal the world. Let's tell stories of how the boy can get the girl. Let's talk about success and assimilation, and that fit perfectly into America.
In the documentary, Broadway composer Charles Strauss describes a haunting story of anti-Semitism he experienced while working on a tobacco farm.
They tied me to a tree and put papers under it and lit a fire. I remember the smoke and inhaling it, and I remember them pummeling my brother. And then the straw boss, whose name was Murphy, came along and they said, here comes the Jew boss, we better stop.
It's coming out of that kind of experience to create optimistic songs like Tomorrow and Put on a Happy Face. There's something about smiling through the tears that is uniquely Jewish.
To see more from the Jewish legacy of Broadway, tune in to the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. Finally, when it comes to the subject of Jews and popular culture, perhaps no one gets more excited than author Lisa Alcalay Klug, who made a splash several years ago with her book, Cool Jew. Now she's back with a new book, Hot Mamala, and I sat down with her recently to talk about it. Here are some of the highlights. When I was growing up, my bubby, my grandmother, would always call me Mamala. But here with me today is author Lisa Alcalay Klug, who uses the term, I think, a little differently in her new book. It's called Hot Mamala, the ultimate guide for every woman of the tribe. So, Lisa, what do you mean by the term hot mamala? Who is a hot mamala?
Well, every woman is really a hot mamala, and I actually am using it very much in the same way that your grandmother used it and beyond. And I really see it as a woman who's living life large, who's exuberant, who's joyous, and is identified and celebrating her Jewish identity.
Your first book is Cool Jew, which was, of a similar style to Hot Mamala, but with a larger focus. How did this book evolve from that?
Well, the way Cool Jew started actually was I work as a freelance journalist, and I wrote a couple of articles. One was for the Forward and one was for the San Francisco Chronicle. And they were about this trend of what you could call a Jewish cultural revival. Jewish pride t-shirts and Jewish music like Matis Yahu, and many other phenomena like this. T-shirts, music, gifts, events, festivals, etc. And as I was doing the research and writing for those articles, I realized there was something bigger here, and that became the basis of Cool Jew. And then while I was writing Cool Jew, again, I realized with my research and my writing that there was more to say here, and that there's a specific message for women to both, empower women, to acknowledge the stereotypes, but move beyond them, celebrate them, and just laugh about them even more.
So speaking of stereotypes, there is a lot in here about shopping and looking good and makeup. And are you concerned at all about perpetuating stereotypes about Jewish women?
I was asked that same question with Cool Jew because there were bottles of Manischewitz in the book, and some both people and animals with large noses, and I realized that some people might be concerned here that there is information regarding shopping and women taking care of their appearance. But the reality is almost every woman shops, for more than enough, and every woman has concerns about her appearance. So rather than furthering the stereotype, again, I said I wanted to embrace who we are as women, celebrate it, and laugh about it.
There is a lot of fun stuff in here. Quotes from people like Joan Rivers, there's drink recipes, there's just sort of musings about all sorts of different things. One of the little things I liked was the marriage vows to me.
Uh-huh.
You say, you're trying to reach all Jewish women, but it does, I think, to me, skew a little young. Do you think that younger Jewish women are in need of these kinds of affirmation?
I do feel that we have such a high rate of assimilation. We have a very high rate of intermarriage. And at the same time, we also have people who are coming to Judaism, who are intermarried or who have other family members who are intermarried or converting. And so I do want to, open the book wide to all types of readers. And the funny thing is with Cool Jew, everyone said, it skews kind of young, but many of my audiences when I would do events were older people who laughed a lot with the book too. So in that same way, I hope that this book, again, is open to a very broad audience, and that it will help satisfy that need to help reinforce positive Jewish identity and embracing, laughing about who we are as Jewish women with the fullness of every part of us.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Lisa, for joining us. The book is Hot Mamala, the ultimate guide for every woman of the tribe.
That's right. And as you can see, there's a sticker on the book that says, you don't have to be Jewish, but it wasn't hot.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rebecca. It was a pleasure being here.
That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, we wish you a happy and healthy new year in 2013. Be well.
The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 291, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and now on Comcast Cable in the on-demand menu under Premium Channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.